Amal clenched his fists, his gaze cutting through the tense air like a blade. "If you think you can control my future, you're wrong. I'll build it myself, brick by brick, just like this house." He was only 13, but life had already turned him into a fighter. In the flickering glow of a street lamp, the rattling sound of his rusty cart echoed through the cracked streets. But when Jamal received a mysterious box from a stranger, everything seemed to change. Inside it lay a secret that could forever alter his life and the fate of his family. But before we dive into the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on future stories. Jamal was only 13, but life had already made him a fighter. In the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, he pushed a rusted shopping cart rattling with scraps of metal, the sharp clang echoing down the cracked pavement of his neighborhood. The streets whispered stories of hardship, and Jamal knew them all too well. Every piece of metal he collected was another meal, another chance to keep his family afloat. His hands, calloused and dirt-streaked, gripped the cart tightly as he weaved through alleyways. At home, his mother Elena was a pillar of strength, though her body sagged under the weight of 2 back-breaking jobs. She rarely slept, and when she did, it was with one eye open, always worrying about Jamal and his little sister Mia. Their apartment was crumbling like the leaky faucet dripped like a metronome of their struggles, and the wallpaper peeled as if trying to escape the suffocating poverty within. Still, Elena insisted on keeping their family together, no matter how the world seemed to conspire against them. Jamal, her voice had been stern that morning, laced with exhaustion but unwavering love. "Don't stay out too late. Come back right after school." "Yes, Ma," Jamal had replied, nodding with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll be back soon." But tonight wasn't like the others. The air felt heavier, the kind that warned of something coming. Good or bad, he couldn't tell. Jamal had just turned a corner when he noticed an elderly man struggling with 2 paper grocery bags. The man, hunched and frail, staggered before tripping over a loose slab of concrete. The bags tore and oranges rolled like marbles onto the street. For a moment, Jamal froze. He wasn't used to stepping in. It wasn't what people around here did. Kindness often came with a cost, and he couldn't afford another burden. Still, something tugged at him, an echo of his mother's lessons about doing right, even when no one's watching. "Hey," Jamal called out, jogging over. "Let me help you." The man looked up, startled, his weathered face lined with both gratitude and skepticism. "Thank you, son. These streets aren't as easy as they used to be." Jamal quickly gathered the scattered groceries, careful not to crush the bread or dent the canned goods. He hoisted the bags into his cart. "You live nearby?" The man hesitated before nodding. "Just down the block, apartment 5A. The walk was quiet at first, the rhythmic squeak of the cart filling the silence. But soon the old man spoke again, his voice low and conspiratorial. "You're a good boy. Not many like you around here anymore. This place, it changes people. Makes them hard." Jamal didn't respond immediately. He knew what the man meant. He'd seen friends go from innocent to dangerous in the blink of an eye, swallowed by the very streets they grew up on. "I just try to help my family," he said finally, shrugging. They reached the man's building, a faded brick structure with graffiti-scrawled walls and a broken security gate. As the man unlocked his door, he turned back to Jamal, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Wait here," he said. "I have something for you." Jamal shifted uneasily, glancing around the empty hallway. Seconds stretched into minutes before the man returned, holding a small, polished wooden box. "This," the man said, handing it to Jamal, "is more valuable than anything you'll ever find on these streets. But it comes with responsibility. Are you ready for that?" Jamal stared at the box, his pulse quickening. It was unexpectedly heavy, its smooth surface cool against his palm. "What's in it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll find out soon enough," the man replied cryptically. "But remember this: choices define us, boy, not where we come from." The man shut the door before Jamal could ask anything else. Standing there, alone in the dim hallway, Jamal felt the weight of the box and the man's words pressing down on him. Something about tonight had shifted the air around him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. As he stepped back into the night, the street lights seemed dimmer, the shadows darker. His cart now held not just scraps, but a mystery he hadn't asked for, a mystery he couldn't ignore. The next morning, Jamal was back at it, his cart clattering down the same cracked streets as he navigated his usual route. The weight of the mysterious box lingered in his mind, but the practical demands of life drowned out his curiosity. Rent was due, Mia needed new shoes, and their fridge was nearly empty. Jamal knew he couldn't afford to lose focus. But as he worked, he noticed something unusual. A man in a sharp suit standing by a black sedan parked conspicuously at the corner. Jamal's instincts prickled. Men in suits didn't belong here. He kept his eyes on the man as he loaded a broken bike frame into his cart. When their gazes finally met, the man nodded, offering a polite smile, then began walking toward him. Jamal's grip tightened on the cart's handle, his body tense. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone cautious. The man extended a hand. "You must be Jamal. I'm Robert, the son of Mr. Arthur, the man you helped yesterday." Jamal blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected to hear anything more about the old man, let alone meet his son. Robert didn't look like someone who grew up in this neighborhood. His suit was immaculate, his shoes polished, and his presence exuded authority, as if he didn't merely live in the world but owned a piece of it. "Yeah, that was me," Jamal said, shrugging. "It was nothing. He's doing the right thing." Robert chuckled. "It may have been nothing to you, but it meant a great deal to my father. He hasn't stopped talking about you since. That's why I'm here, to thank you properly." Jamal frowned, glancing warily at the sedan. "You don't need to thank me, really." "I insist," Robert replied smoothly. "Why don't we talk somewhere more comfortable, perhaps your home?" Jamal's suspicion deepened. Inviting a stranger to their apartment wasn't an option, not with his mother's strict rules. "Thanks, but I'm good. My family doesn't take handouts." Robert smiled faintly, unruffled by the boy's resistance. "You're a lot like your mother," he said. "She'll probably say the same thing when I meet her." Before Jamal could respond, Robert handed him a business card. "Just think about it. I'd like to help your family. Call me when you're ready." That evening, the apartment buzzed with tension as Jamal recounted the encounter to his mother. Elena listened silently, her brows knitted together as she folded laundry. The weight of her responsibilities was evident in every line on her face. "Ma," Jamal said, "I don't trust him. Nobody gives something for nothing. He's up to something." Elena sighed, setting down a worn shirt. "Jamal, not everyone has bad intentions. Maybe he's just grateful. Or maybe he's just looking for something in return," Jamal countered. "You always said nothing in life is free." "I also said we shouldn't let pride blind us," she replied, her voice firm. "If someone is offering to help, we should at least listen." And that was how Robert found himself sitting in their modest living room the next day, looking out of place against the peeling wallpaper and mismatched furniture. He had come prepared, speaking with polished sincerity about his gratitude for Jamal's actions and his desire to pay it forward. "I understand life here isn't easy," Robert began, his gaze shifting between Elena and Jamal. "Your son showed kindness to my father when he didn't have to. I'd like to return that kindness by helping improve your living situation. It's the least I can do." Elena folded her arms, her posture stiff. "We appreciate the offer, but we don't take charity. We get by just fine." Robert nodded, his tone respectful. "I understand your hesitation, Mrs. Carter, but this isn't charity. It's an investment in your family's future. A better home means better opportunities, especially for your children." Jamal cut in, his voice sharp. "We don't need your help. We've managed this long without it." Robert's gaze lingered on Jamal, his expression unreadable. "I admire your independence, Jamal, but even the strongest among us need help sometimes. My father taught me that." For a long moment the room was silent. Elena's face softened as she glanced at Mia, who sat quietly at the corner table, coloring with broken crayons. The thought of giving her children a chance at something better tugged at her heart. Finally she spoke. "If I agree," she said cautiously, "what exactly are you offering?" Robert smiled, sensing her resolve wavering. "I'll fund a complete renovation of this apartment. New furniture, better insulation, modern amenities. No strings attached. Just a thank you for your son's kindness." Elena hesitated, then looked at Jamal. "What do you think?" Jamal's jaw tightened. He didn't like it, not one bit. But he could see the flicker of hope in his mother's eyes, the rare glimmer of something that had been missing for years. Against his better judgment, he gave a reluctant nod. "Fine, but if anything goes wrong, we're out." "Nothing will go wrong," Robert assured them, his voice smooth. "You have my word." Over the next few weeks, their apartment transformed. Workers arrived daily, carrying in shiny new appliances and fresh coats of paint. The dingy walls were replaced with vibrant colors, the creaky floors with polished hard wood. Mia's room became a wonderland of soft toys and bright decorations, and even Jamal couldn't help but marvel at the sleek furniture and gleaming fixtures. But as the renovations progressed, so did Jamal's unease. Robert's generosity didn't sit right with him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the man than he let on. Jamal began noticing things. Robert's frequent phone calls in hushed tones, his vague answers whenever Jamal asked why he was so invested in their family. One afternoon, Jamal decided to follow him. He trailed Robert from the apartment to his car, careful to stay out of sight. Robert drove to a part of town Jamal rarely ventured into, where the streets were cleaner, the buildings taller, and the people wealthier. He parked in front of an imposing office building and disappeared inside. Jamal waited, his heart pounding. Something wasn't right. He didn't know what Robert was hiding, but he was determined to find out. As dusk settled over the city, Jamal made a decision. He would open the wooden box the old man had given him. Whatever secrets it held, he hoped they would help him understand what was really going on and why Robert had come into their lives. The renovations began the next morning. Trucks rolled up to the curb carrying supplies, planks of wood, cans of paint, new fixtures, all of it gleaming with possibility. For the first time in years, Jamal's street felt alive, buzzing with activity. Workers filed into the apartment with tools in hand, tearing down the old to make way for the new. Jamal, who had planned to keep his distance, found himself drawn into the commotion. "Kid," one of the crew members, a burly man named Sam, called out, waving a hammer. "You gonna stand there gawking, or you want to put those muscles to work?" Jamal hesitated. He didn't want to appear ungrateful or weak. Dropping his backpack, he grabbed a stack of planks and carried them inside. The weight strained his thin frame, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. If he was going to accept this so-called generosity, He'd prove he was earning it. Sam chuckled as Jamal set the wood down with a loud thud. "You've got a strong back, kid. Keep this up and you'll be running a crew one day." "I'm just trying to help my family," Jamal replied, brushing sweat from his forehead. His voice carried a hint of defiance, a silent challenge to anyone who doubted him. The days blurred into a relentless rhythm of hammering, sawing, and painting. Jamal worked alongside the crew after school, his hands blistering as he lifted, nailed, and painted with determination. But despite the progress inside the apartment, the world outside seemed to grow colder. Mr. Ramirez, the owner of the corner store where Jamal often stopped for snacks, was the first to voice what others were only whispering. "Jamal," Ramirez said one afternoon, his eyes narrowing as he handed over a can of soda, "I hear your place is getting fixed up real nice." "Yeah," Jamal replied cautiously, feeling the weight of the man's gaze. "What about it?" Ramirez leaned forward, his voice low. "People like Robert don't help for free. Be careful, boy. He's not from around here. He doesn't understand what it's like for people like us." Jamal stiffened, his grip tightening around the can. "He's just paying my mom back for helping his dad. That's all." Ramirez didn't look convinced. "Maybe, but nothing in this world is free. Keep your eyes open." The warning echoed in Jamal's mind as he left the store. It wasn't the first time someone had questioned Robert's motives. His friend Malik had brought it up the day before. "Jay, people are talking," Malik had said, his voice serious for once. They sat on the stoop outside Jamal's building, watching the workers unload another truck. "They think this is too good to be true." Jamal frowned, kicking at a loose piece of concrete. "But what do they know? Robert's just trying to help." "Maybe," Malik replied, his tone skeptical. "But nobody throws money around like this unless they want something. My uncle says guys like him are always looking for an angle." Jamal wanted to dismiss Malik's words, but the doubt gnawed at him. Robert hadn't done anything outright suspicious, yet there was something about his polished demeanor, his easy confidence, that didn't sit right. And then there were the phone calls. Jamal had overheard snippets while carrying supplies, Robert speaking in hushed tones, mentioning timelines and approvals, his voice tinged with urgency. The neighborhood skepticism began to seep into Jamal's home. Elena tried to ignore the gossip, but even she couldn't deny the tension. One evening, as they sat around their small temporary table in the freshly painted kitchen, she broached the topic. "Jamal," she said, her voice heavy, "do you think I made a mistake?" Jamal looked up from his plate of rice and beans, startled. "What do you mean?" "Accepting Robert's help," Elena admitted, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "Everyone's talking. Ramirez, Mrs. Jones, even Malik's mom stopped me on the street today." Jamal swallowed hard, his appetite fading. "It's too late now, Ma. The work's almost done." Maybe," Elena murmured, her gaze distant. "But what if they're right? What if this comes back to hurt us?" Her words settled over the table like a storm cloud, casting a shadow over the new walls and shiny fixtures. For the first time, the apartment didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like a trap. The doubts boiled over one Friday afternoon when Jamal overheard a heated argument between Robert and one of the workers. Jamal had stayed late helping Sam clean up when he heard raised voices in the hallway. "You're cutting it too close," Robert snapped, his usually calm tone sharp with frustration. "The deadline is non-negotiable." "We're doing the best we can," the worker replied defensively, "but these things take time." "Make it happen," Robert interrupted, his voice cold. "Or I'll find someone who can." Jamal froze, his pulse quickening. He pressed himself against the wall, straining to hear more, but the conversation ended abruptly. When Robert emerged moments later, his face was a mask of composure, but Jamal could see the tension in his clenched jaw. "Everything okay, Mr. Roberts?" Jamal asked cautiously, stepping into the hallway. Robert's expression softened instantly, his charm snapping back into place. "Of course, Jamal, just some logistical hiccups. Nothing to worry about." But Jamal was worried. The more he thought about it, the more Robert's polished exterior seemed like a facade, hiding something far more complicated and dangerous. That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. The wooden box, still unopened, sat on the floor by his bed, its presence both comforting and unnerving. He'd been too afraid to open it before, but now, with so many unanswered questions swirling in his mind, he decided it was time. With trembling hands, Jamal lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of yellowed documents and a small key. The papers were covered in faded handwriting, schematics, calculations, and something that looked like a map. Jamal's eyes scanned the pages, but their meaning eluded him. What he did understand, however, was the note tucked at the bottom. "Jamal, if you're reading this, you're in danger. Trust no one, not even Robert." The words sent a chill down his spine. Who was the old man really? And what had Jamal gotten himself and his family into? As the neighborhood buzzed with rumors and the renovations neared completion, Jamal knew one thing for certain: the mystery of the box and Robert's true intentions were connected. And if he didn't uncover the truth soon, it might be too late. The storm came without warning. Ominous gray clouds rolled over the neighborhood, blotting out the last traces of sunlight. By the time the first raindrops splattered against the windows, the workers had already packed up for the day, leaving behind stacks of exposed wood and drywall in the yard. Jamal, standing by the kitchen sink, watched with growing unease as the rain intensified, drumming against the roof like a relentless heartbeat. "Jamal, leave it," his mother said firmly from the couch. She was cradling a mug of tea, her face drawn with exhaustion. "The workers will take care of it tomorrow." But Jamal couldn't sit still. The thought of all their hard work, weeks of hauling, hammering, and painting being washed away was unbearable. Without a word, he grabbed a jacket and stepped out into the downpour, ignoring his mother's protests. The rain was icy, stinging his skin as he sprinted into the yard. The stacks of wood were already soaked, the tarp that had been loosely thrown over them flapping uselessly in the wind. Jamal wrestled with the tarp, his fingers slipping against the slick material as the storm howled around him. His heart pounded as he fought to secure it, the wind threatening to rip it from his grasp. Jamal, she tried vainly to get Jamal to stop, and people were staring at her. Jamal felt his mother's voice cut through the chaos. She was standing on the porch, a shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders, her face pale with worry. "What are you doing? Get back inside." "I can't let it all get ruined, Ma," Jamal shouted back, his voice barely audible over the storm. "We've worked too hard for this." As he spoke, a gust of wind tore the tarp from his hands, sending it hurtling into the air. Jamal lunged after it, his foot slipping in the mud. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his side. For a moment, the world spun, the rain blurring his vision. "Jamal!" His mother was at his side in an instant, pulling him up with surprising strength. "What were you thinking? You could have gotten hurt." "I'm fine," Jamal said through gritted teeth, wincing as he stood. "It's just a tarp." "It's not just a tarp," she snapped, her voice trembling. "It's you risking your life over something we don't even own." Jamal froze at her words, the weight of them sinking in. He looked down at his mud-streaked hands, suddenly unsure of why he had been so desperate to protect the materials. Was it pride? Or was it something deeper, something tied to the doubts that had been gnawing at him for weeks? The next day the storm had passed, leaving the streets glistening with puddles. Jamal sat on the porch, his side aching from the fall when Robert arrived. His sleek black car pulled up to the curb, the sunlight catching on its polished surface. Robert stepped out, his suit as immaculate as ever, a briefcase in hand. "Jamal?" Robert greeted him with a nod. I heard about the storm. I trust everything's intact?" "Or barely," Jamal muttered, his voice edged with frustration. He didn't look up as Robert approached. Robert placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder, his grip firm. "You've done good work here. I'm proud of you." Jamal stiffened, shrugging off the compliment. "I didn't do it for you." Robert chuckled, his tone calm but with a hint of steel. I know, but let's talk about why I'm here." Jamal finally looked up, meeting Robert's gaze. There was something different in his expression, an intensity that Jamal hadn't noticed before. Robert opened his briefcase, pulling out a stack of papers. "I'm investing in your future, Jamal," Robert said, his voice smooth. "And with investment comes expectations. These renovations are just the beginning. I want to see you succeed. School, work, staying out of trouble. That's how you can repay me." Jamal's jaw tightened. "I never asked for any of this." "No, you didn't," Robert agreed, his smile faint. "But life is full of opportunities, and this is yours. Don't waste it." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jamal felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. He had worked tirelessly alongside the crew, putting his blood and sweat into the renovations, yet here was Robert framing it as a gift, a debt that Jamal owed. "I don't want charity," Jamal said, his voice firm. "I'll work hard, but I want to earn it." Robert's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "Earning it means taking the opportunities I'm giving you. Think about it, Jamal. This neighborhood isn't going to give you a second chance." Jamal stood, his fists clenched. "I'll make my own chances." For a moment, they stared at each other, the tension crackling like the aftermath of the storm. Then Robert stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Suit yourself, but don't throw away what you've been given." As Robert drove away, Jamal's mind raced. The renovations, the expectations, the mysterious box, it was all connected, but how? And what did Robert really want from him? That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, the unopened box on his lap, its weight both physical and symbolic. He thought about the old man's warning, trust no one, not even Robert. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, but he was determined to put them together. Finally, he opened the box again, pulling out the documents and key. This time, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a name scrawled in the corner of one of the pages. Arthur Kensington. The name sent a jolt through him. That was the old man's name. But why would he leave these papers for Jamal, and what did they have to do with Robert? As he flipped through the documents, a pattern began to emerge. The schematics detailed plans for a property, an address not far from Jamal's neighborhood. The calculations suggested something valuable, perhaps even lucrative, hidden within the property. The map marked a specific location within the lot, circled in bold red ink. Jamal's heart pounded as the pieces clicked into place. The renovations weren't about gratitude, they were about access. Robert wasn't helping his family out of kindness. He was using them to get closer to whatever was hidden at that address. The realization hit Jamal like a punch to the gut. He had to act, and fast. But who could he trust? His mother? Malik? The old man was gone, and Robert was clearly not the ally he claimed to be. For now, the only thing Jamal knew for sure was that he couldn't stay silent. Whatever Robert was after, it had to be big, and it could change everything. Jamal tightened his grip on the key, determination hardening in his chest. The storm may have passed, but the real fight was just beginning. The house was finally finished. Jamal stood on the porch, the fresh paint still gleaming under the morning sun. For the first time in years, the building looked like a home, solid, welcoming, and secure. The walls no longer crumbled under the weight of neglect, and the air inside carried the faint scent of cedar and lavender instead of damp and despair. Jamal's mother walked through the house in quiet awe, running her fingers along the smooth countertops and pristine floors. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought we'd have this." Jamal wanted to feel the same. He wanted to revel in the warmth of their new home and let the weight of years of hardship slip away. But he couldn't shake the unease in his chest. The storm hadn't just been outside, it was inside him too. It wasn't over. Not yet. The neighborhood's whispers hadn't stopped. If anything, they grew louder. "Too good to be true," Mrs. Jones muttered as she swept her porch, her sharp eyes following Jamal as he walked past. "I don't trust that man," Mr. Ramirez said pointedly to another customer at his store. "People like him always have an angle." Jamal ignored them as best he could, but the tension was unavoidable. Even Malik had grown distant, his easy laughter replaced with caution whenever the topic of Robert came up. "You sure about this, Jay?" Malik asked one afternoon as they sat on the stoop outside Jamal's gleaming new apartment. The contrast between the renovated home and the rest of the block was stark, like a beacon in a sea of gray. "It's like he's buying you." Jamal clenched his fists. "He's not buying me. I've been working my butt off to prove I don't need handouts." "Doesn't mean he's not expecting something," Malik said with a shrug. "Just watch your back, man." Jamal nodded, the words sticking in his mind like barbed wire. Despite the doubts, there were moments of clarity, moments when Jamal felt like he was finally earning respect. The workers who had once seen him as a kid now treated him as an equal. Sam, the crew's leader, clapped him on the shoulder after a long day of hauling supplies. "You did good, kid," Sam said with a grin. "You've got what it takes to go far." Jamal felt a flicker of pride, even as the shadow of Robert's expectations loomed over him. The man had been unusually quiet since their last conversation, but Jamal knew it was only a matter of time before he came back with more demands. Robert didn't seem like the type to leave loose ends. At home, his mother was a different story. She had embraced the changes with open arms, her exhaustion replaced with cautious hope. For the first time in years, she looked lighter, as though the burden she carried had finally eased. "This is a chance for us, Jay," she said one evening as they sat at the new dining table. The overhead light cast a warm glow on her face, making her look younger. "We need this." "But at what cost, Ma?" Jamal asked quietly, his fork hovering over his plate. Her expression faltered, but she didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and placed a hand over his. "Sometimes you have to take a chance, even if it scares you." Jamal wanted to believe her. He wanted to trust that this was just the beginning of something better. But deep down, he couldn't forget the box, the schematics, and the warning scrawled on the paper. Trust no one, not even Robert. The next week, Robert returned. His car was as pristine as ever, but his demeanor had shifted. There was a sharpness to his movements, a subtle edge to his voice as he stepped into the house. "Jamal," Robert said, his gaze sweeping over the newly renovated space. "Looks like you've been putting in the work." "I have," Jamal replied evenly, meeting Robert's eyes. "What do you want?" Robert's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here to check in on my investment." Jamal's mother stepped into the room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Mr. Robert," she said warmly, "we can't thank you enough for what you've done. This home, it means everything to us." Robert inclined his head, his expression softening slightly. "I'm glad to hear that, Mrs. Carter. I only want the best for your family." But Jamal wasn't convinced. "What does that mean exactly?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Robert turned to face him fully. "It means I expect you to make the most of this opportunity, Jamal. No more running the streets, no more wasting time. You've got potential, and I don't want to see it go to waste." "I don't need you telling me how to live my life," Jamal shot back. "I'm working hard, and I'll keep doing it, but I'll do it on my terms." Robert's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek envelope, handing it to Jamal. "This is for you," he said. "Consider it a roadmap. Use it wisely." Jamal hesitated before taking the envelope. Inside, he found a series of documents: applications for scholarships, apprenticeship programs, and letters of recommendation bearing Robert's signature. "This is your chance to break free from this neighborhood," Robert said, his tone serious. "Don't waste it." Jamal didn't reply. He couldn't. The weight of the papers in his hand felt both like a lifeline and a chain, tethering him to a man he didn't fully trust. That night, Jamal sat by his window, staring at the documents spread out on his desk. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "This is a chance for us." But so did the warning in the old man's letter: trust no one. As the neighborhood slept, Jamal made a decision. He would take the opportunities Robert had offered, but on his own terms. He would find a way to repay the man's generosity without becoming beholden to him. And he would uncover the truth about the box and its connection to Robert, no matter what it took. For now, the house stood as a symbol of hope, a new beginning for his family. But Jamal knew the journey was far from over. The real battle was just beginning. The house was more than just a roof over their heads. It was a promise of what could be. Fresh paint covered the scars of years gone by, and every gleaming surface told a story of perseverance. For the first time in Jamal's life, their home didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a beginning. Jamal sat in the living room, the scholarship papers spread out before him. His mother was in the kitchen humming softly, something she hadn't done in years. Mia played with her new dollhouse nearby, her laughter filling the space with warmth. Despite the peace inside, Jamal's thoughts churned. Robert's offer wasn't just an opportunity, it was a test, and Jamal was determined to pass it. On his own terms. Later that evening, Robert arrived unannounced. His polished shoes clicked against the pavement as he approached the house, his demeanor calm but expectant. Jamal met him on the porch, his shoulders squared and his expression firm. "You've made a decision," Robert said, more a statement than a question. Jamal nodded. I'll take your offer, but I'll take your offer, but under one condition." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I'll do the work," Jamal said, his voice steady. "But I want to earn it. No handouts, no shortcuts. If I'm going to make something of myself, it has to be on my own terms." For a moment, Robert said nothing, his sharp eyes studying Jamal as if weighing his worth. Then, slowly, he smiled. a genuine smile, free of the usual polish. "Fair enough," Robert replied, extending his hand. "I'll make sure you get the chance to prove yourself. But know this, the world won't go easy on you. If you falter, it's on you to get back up." I would love to hear what you think, so leave a comment below. What was your favorite part of this video? Jamal shook his hand, his grip firm. "I've been getting back up my whole life." Robert chuckled softly. "Good, then you'll do just fine." That night, the family gathered on the new porch, the warm wood smooth beneath their feet. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, the setting sun casting long shadows across the street. Elena leaned back in her chair, her face serene as she watched the horizon. "Look at the sky, Jay," she said, her voice soft. "It's beautiful." Jamal glanced up, his heart swelling with a feeling he couldn't quite name. Hope. For the first time, it felt real. Something he could touch. Something he could hold on to. "Yeah, Ma," he said, a small smile playing at his lips. "It's like a brand new world." Mia giggled beside him, her tiny hand slipping into his. The weight of responsibility still sat on his shoulders, but it felt lighter now, balanced by the strength of his family and the opportunities ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jamal let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But he wasn't alone. He had his mother's unwavering faith, Mia's innocent joy, and, for better or worse, Robert's belief in his potential. Jamal looked down at his hands that had built this home, piece by piece, and carried the weight of his family's struggles. Now, those same hands held the power to shape his future. He didn't know where the path would lead, but he was ready to walk it. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid.